Salve a tutti, sono Marco Merola, un giornalista scientifico e direttore divulgazione e outreach del FOR, Festival for the Earth. E qui siamo nel podcast del FOR che abbiamo voluto evocativamente chiamare 4Acast, dalla parola inglese forecast, previsione, perché alla fine della chiacchierata col nostro ospite di oggi chiederemo proprio una previsione sul futuro del pianeta Terra. Ci troviamo nello studio televisivo, nel bellissimo studio televisivo dell'Accademia delle Scienze del Politecnico di Torino, siamo proprio al centro della città di Torino e qui di fianco a me Guido Saracco, ex rettore del Politecnico di Torino e direttore di Prometeo, che è il contenitore culturale del Politecnico di Torino. L'ospite che abbiamo gratitissimo qui con noi è un collega giornalista, Damian Carrington. Welcome, Damian. Damian è l'environmental editor del Guardian, quindi è un giornalista ambientale e sarà qui con noi per parlare un po' di questioni legate appunto al nostro lavoro di giornalisti che si occupano di ambiente e anche un po' la visione che hanno ovviamente nel Regno Unito da cui lui proviene. Damian, partendo dal fatto che il tuo background di studi è quello di un geologo, tu sei geologo di formazione, che cosa possiamo dire riguardo questo grande dibattito internazionale sull'antropocene, questo nome che hanno voluto dare all'era dell'uomo, l'era in cui l'uomo ha lasciato la sua impronta? E soprattutto, secondo te, è pensabile che nel prossimo futuro si possa verificare un cosiddetto ritorno a ecocene, quindi dove l'uomo, il genere umano, fa un passo indietro, scala un passo indietro lasciando spazio alla natura?
Well, thanks, Marco. Thank you very much for having me here. The debate around the Anthropocene caused a massive row in geological circles because it wasn't just a scientific question, it was almost a philosophical question. So I think it was very clear from the evidence that the world has changed very much during the 20th century through lots of different measures. However, if you're a geologist, you're used to dealing with millions of years, not decades. And so I think that was where the divide happened between the two camps. Personally, I think declaring the period, say, from 1952 with the hydrogen bomb tests as the Anthropocene would have been a good idea. I think the world has changed, and I think that human beings have changed the world in an enormous way. The second part of your question was about, can we return to an ecocene? I think we're a very long way from doing that. The consumption of materials around the world, the destruction of wild places, the sheer number of people on the planet, we're heading towards 10 million people, means that we are a very long way from it. Is it possible in theory? I think yes. Everywhere in the world where humans have reduced the pressure on the land, nature is very elastic. It comes bouncing back quite quickly. We see that in some fisheries where they've stopped exploiting it. One of the strangest examples is around Chernobyl, where they had the nuclear accidents. The land around there is this kind of wild paradise now because people haven't gone there. And so I'm not suggesting we explode nuclear power stations, of course, but what I'm saying is that nature can come back. So in theory, yes. In practice, we will see.
Io vorrei con lei affrontare un altro tema che è quello legato alla necessità di comunicare alle persone comuni, cosa che i giornalisti fanno molto bene, ma che dal mio punto di vista anche le università, cioè i luoghi dove si fa ricerca, dove si formano le persone, devono imparare a fare. Lei ha esperienza di università che con voi hanno già collaborato e possono essere portate come esempi in questo tipo di divulgazione?
Thanks. It's a great question, Guido. I mean, I think I had a short scientific career and a long journalistic one now. But what I would say, I wrote about science to begin with, but environment and climate change for the last 17 years or so. And pretty much everything I do, in the end, is based on science. Science is the only method we've developed as a species of understanding the world in a verifiable way, and therefore it's super important. And I think that I agree with you absolutely that scientists should get out and communicate more. I think part of the problem has been that for a long time there's been this idea that scientists have to be objective robots. They don't have any emotions. They just, collect their data and they process it and they work out the statistical significance, and then they present their paper in a very kind of dull way. I think that's a mistake, and I think it has caused us some problems, because we know that no scientist, no journalist can be truly objective, and we have to lean into these emotions. We are human beings, and I think when the public sees scientists not just as experts in their field, which is really valuable, but also as human beings who love the world, they care about their children, they're worried about their future, I think that becomes more real. And in terms of universities, I would say that some are very good and some are not very good at all, and it surprises me. There are some very prestigious universities, which I won't name, which are very poor at communicating. They have brilliant scientists, I know they do, but they don't stay in touch with us, they don't let us know what's happening, whereas others, I mean, in the UK, I would name University College London, Oxford's quite good, Leeds, Bristol, Exeter's really good around environmental stuff. And I think what they have done is realise that what they've realised is that performing the scientific study is not the whole job. Okay, until it's arrived with the public, with politicians, with other people, you haven't completed your work. And so I think within those universities, they've employed people who can be like journalists within the university, and they go and find people and talk to people, and then they highlight the best stories, and then they come to us and tell us what's going on. Some of it happens through the scientific journals, but I don't think universities should rely on it. I mean, I think the other reason, and I've made this argument in universities, is that most university research is paid for by the public, by taxpayers. Shouldn't scientists be telling the people that pay their wages what they've been doing? Isn't that important? I think that this idea from some scientists that it's a bad thing for me to be out there seeking publicity, and people, my peers will dislike me for doing this. I say no. This is important. What you're doing is important. So get out there and tell people about it.
Rimanendo un attimo sulla questione della comunicazione, della divulgazione dei temi ambientali, in Italia ma anche in altri paesi c'è da sempre, da tanto tempo, un grosso dibattito riguardo l'utilità e l'opportunità di avere nelle redazioni dei media, dei giornali, delle TV, degli esperti di tema climatico, ambientale, quindi proprio dei desk tematizzati su questo. Secondo te è un buon modo di affrontare il discorso dell'informazione climatica?
It's a good question and not an easy one to answer necessarily. So the advantage of having a specialist desk is that people gain experience, they gain the contacts, they know people, they follow the subject over a long period of time, and they develop expertise in understanding what's happening, what's new, who to talk to, and so on. The risk of it is that it becomes like a ghetto. Okay,
yeah.
So that people just say, oh, well, that's the climate corner. The real news is over here with the politics and business and sport and economics and all that. Oh, okay, fine, we'll get the climate guy back again just for a minute. Go on, terrify us about the end of the world. So I think what we found at The Guardian, The Guardian's been quite serious about environmental journalism for a long time, but in 2008 they expanded it. That's when I joined. And what we found is that we have expanded the team and got more expertise. We have many correspondents now specialised in environment. But most importantly, what we have tried to do is spread this to a wider circle. So, for example, maybe 10 years ago, it was only the environment and climate desk that wrote about renewable energy or electric cars.
Yeah.
Now, I never write about them, because now that's the business team, okay? That's their business. And the same happens in some of the kind of political and economic spheres. We used to, report on the Green Party and some aspects of green politics. Now it's a pretty central part of the political job. And with our foreign correspondents, we have put together information so that if they are responding to a natural disaster, a flood or a heat wave or a drought, they have, information that they can use in their copy that they send back to make sure that the climate crisis is always mentioned as part of one of these problems. I sort of think that ultimately, in a way, you might not want to have climate journalists or environment journalists at all, because it should be a part of everybody's job. You know, I mean, a good example, actually, I don't know if you noticed in tennis, right, sport. So they had a problem with wildfires at the New York Open a couple of years ago. The smoke was coming on screen. And then just a couple of weeks ago, a player was asking the organisers, did they want to kill a player because it was so hot out on court? You know? So, I mean, you know, climate change and the crisis is getting into all these areas. And so I think for now, it's important to have some specialists. Maybe in 10, 20 years, it should be part of every journalist's job.
Oh, that is a forecast.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
First forecast. Senta, mi interesserebbe sapere se non ritiene opportuno che il suo sapere, cioè saper comunicare alle persone, saper parlare, saper scrivere, non diventasse una materia con cui si formano gli scienziati, i tecnologi di cui parlavamo prima, nella mia prima domanda. E se questo in particolare, alla luce di questa intelligenza artificiale generativa, cioè dei software come ChatGPT, non debba tenere anche questo in considerazione, come stia cambiando il suo lavoro e come possa cambiare anche il modo di comunicare degli scienziati. Vorrei il suo parere su questo punto.
Thanks. Yeah. So, I mean, as it happens, just on Monday this week, I spent 2 hours in a meeting with a group of researchers whose focus is air pollution. And I was just describing to them how journalism works. What do we do? What are the questions we're asking? What information do we need? How do you go about interacting with the media? I mean, sometimes scientists are a little bit frightened of journalists. I understand that. There are good journalists, there are bad journalists, you know. When I introduce myself to people and say I'm a journalist, people say, I better be careful what I say, you know. And so you have to get over that. So I was trying to sort of tell them about how to identify good journalists and how to work with them in a productive way. In terms of artificial intelligence, I think the important thing you said is remaining in control, right? Because, I mean, I've found when I've tried to use it myself, it, of course, as we know, hallucinates and makes things up. But I think it could be helpful, perhaps sometimes, in terms of phrasing things a little better, trying to find a simpler way. I think one way, and this is only an experiment, but at The Guardian, they're experimenting with using artificial intelligence to suggest headlines. So it might suggest 5 or 6 headlines, and then the sub-editor could say, actually, that one's quite good, but I'm just going to change it a little to make sure it's okay. So that could be a useful way. I think AI is a useful tool, but you have to be pretty careful with it.
La mia prossima domanda riguarda un argomento che ti è particolarmente caro, visto che ti sei occupato della carbon bomb e quindi del tema della CO2. Una delle sfide più grandi a livello planetario sembra essere quello del cosiddetto carbon capture and storage, quindi catturare e stoccare, depositare CO2 in altri luoghi, in altri posti, prendendolo ovviamente dall'atmosfera. Secondo te questa è una tecnologia, la tecnologia che si riferisce a questa operazione è veramente robusta, pronta per essere utilizzata, o c'è molta anche propaganda, invece ci vuole ancora più tempo per arrivare a questo obiettivo?
It's a very good question. So carbon capture and storage is going to be important, but in my view, in quite small niche applications. So I'll explain a little more. I used to be a geologist a long time ago, and so I'm attracted by the idea of CCS, you know, from a technical point of view. I remember talking to somebody at Shell, one of the big oil companies, who said, our business fundamentally is moving liquids. That's what we do. And so moving liquids in reverse back into the reservoirs is a good idea. I think the oil industry has actually missed a big trick in that if they had developed it properly 10 years ago, I think it might play a much bigger role than it can now. I think, as you say, there's the problem of propaganda. And last week I learned that in the UK, some companies promoting carbon capture and storage in the UK were opposing it in other countries because they thought it was going to be forced upon them. So, you know, there is definitely a propaganda element, and certainly putting carbon capture and storage on a power station, a gas power station, I don't think that should happen. I don't think it will happen. It's just crazy. It's too expensive. Why not just build a wind farm or a solar farm? However, in things like perhaps steel making, some industrial processes, cement, things like that, those are really difficult to decarbonise. And so I think CCS will have some role in that. And in the UK, I know there's some projects already starting to take place. I don't think the engineering is that hard, actually. As I say, you know, with the oil and gas industry, they have a lot of expertise and experience in these areas. The big problem, and I remember asking the chief executive of Shell about this, why haven't you done CCS already? And he said, well, the shareholders won't agree to it. And the reason for that is there wasn't a business model. There was no market for it. So until there's a price on the carbon, which allows them to make a business out of putting it back in the ground, I think it will be hard.
Una domanda da giornalista a giornalista. Quali sono le sfide più dure oggi per chi fa il giornalista ambientale?
I think there are two really big things that concern me right now. The first is disinformation, so fake information put on social media being amplified by AI, because if we can't agree on a set of facts as a society, how do we move towards the solution? The second thing, which I think has become more apparent to me as the problem, is actually social inequality. I think climate change is a social justice problem at the end of the day, and unless we can deal with the inequality in societies, I don't think those societies are going to accept the changes that we need to get forward. So there's two very big challenges. Those are the things that concern me as a journalist right now.
E ora l'ultima domanda, che è la domanda delle domande, che è quella che dà il nome poi al nostro podcast, la previsione, la forecast, la previsione sul futuro. Nella tua posizione di giornalista ambientale, secondo la tua esperienza, sei stato anche un ricercatore, uno scienziato, quale pensi che possa essere un futuro possibile, probabile per il pianeta Terra?
Well, I think things look pretty bad, if I'm honest, at the moment. You know, I've done this job quite a long time, and we've had the knowledge to act for a very long time, but that action hasn't happened. And so in that sense, I'm quite pessimistic about the future. We are going to have more extreme weather, more people are going to suffer all around the world. However, I am optimistic about people. That's one of the good things in my job. I get to meet a lot of people who are working very hard to try and make a difference. And if there's one good thing about the climate change, is that every small thing matters. Every fraction of a degree that we save, every ton of carbon we save from getting into the atmosphere, reduces human suffering. It's as simple as that. So the fight will never be over. You can always do more. Even if it gets bad, there's no point at which we can give up. And that's, in a way, that's what keeps me going in the job. The fact that, you know, every little thing makes a difference, and there'll never be a point at which we should be giving up.
Okay, great. Okay, so grazie, thank you very much, Damian, and good luck. Buona fortuna per il tuo futuro.
Thanks for having me, Marco. Thank you, Guido.
Grazie a te.